This guest is a dad, not bad, not bad. You know, these shows when he was a lad, and some were sad or made him mad, but our guest is Mr. Ed.
I am Mr. Ed. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
I was hoping he'd
That
skip
joke
that.
works.
I saw that on the list of shows in the 60s, and I was hoping that one wasn't going to come up. But
Nope,
now we got it out of the way.
we make it work.
You're so proud of yourself with that one.
I am so proud of myself. Wait, we need to get to the episode. Cue the music. Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that's just like summer in northern Minnesota, always in the 60s. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm Ed.
And this is the episode about the 1960s. Guys, we have a very special guest. It's my father. His name's Ed. So if you were like, I don't get the joke at the beginning, now you get it. It's perfect. It's wonderful. Yeah. But
Well, you'll probably have his name in the description, so
You didn't
people will
have that
probably have
show
already
on when you
seen.
were in school either, so
Yeah.
No. I showed the theme song to Sayla like a month ago or whatever, and she's just like, oh, okay. I don't know why it came up as just like, oh, I should show you this is what TV was like. And she's like, great.
So I've heard the theme song, and I know it's about a talking horse, but that's all I know about Mr. Ed. I've never actually seen an episode.
Do you know how they make Mr. Ed's lips talk?
My guess is like some kind of food, like peanut butter or something.
You're right. Peanut butter right above his lip. And so he'd be licking it, and it would look like he's flapping his gums talking.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So we are talking about 1960 shows, but before we get into it, we knew we needed to get someone who was alive in the 60s, watched shows when they were a kid. And so it's kind of funny. It's like I think about the shows I watched when I was a kid, and of course my dad is a big part of that because he'd tape these shows and we'd watch them. And so there's some shows that I watched really early on that I don't remember very much of, like Touched by an Angel or Quantum Leap. And then we'd watch some shows that were a little more modern after that, like Star Trek Voyager. Like I remember a lot more episodes of that, or Home Improvement. Those are a couple like shows that we watched when I was a kid that we would tape these, and then we'd gather as a family and watch them way before streaming. So that was my childhood. So we're going to get a little bit of Ed's childhood. But to get a general feel for your TV acumen, what are some TV shows that are top ranked for you, not just in the 60s?
Oh. I should Well, you mentioned some of those you recorded. The Quantum Leaps and Home Improvement, and that there were growing up. There were the Green Acres and the like Beverly Hillbillies and Hogan's Heroes, Gilligan's Island. When you first talked to me about this, what I remember on some of these, I remember some of the shows like Gilligan's Island and Hogan's Heroes. I Dream of Jeannie was one. I remember seeing shows like they're in their first season or two in black and white, and then becoming color TV shows.
Yeah, that became the standard in the 60s, right? By the end of the 60s, pretty much everything was color.
Pretty much everything was, but it was just strange to think about that. That wasn't always the case, and saw that happen. Yeah. Which is kind of weird looking back on it now when
it's crazy to see the landscape of media and how it changed. Even in that time, like late 50s to early 70s, like just in movies too, like it shifted so much because like you had all these music, like right after movies became talkies, you still had these movies that were doing musicals, and like this musical style continued until like the 50s. And then people were like, oh, I'm a little sick of these musicals, and like they just don't ring true by like 60s. And then like you started getting more into like the gangster movies, the westerns, the more action packed. And then you had the 70s, like a lot more progressive era. And so you had between 50s and 70s is like TV and movies changed so drastically. So it's going to be really interesting to go back to the time of shows like Brady Bunch that was just like all like saccharine family values versus what we have today.
Well, in the 70s, yeah, you had Brady Bunch, but you also had All in the Family, which is kind of the opposite end of it.
Yeah, you did. And then you had some, like Sanford and Son, of like a dad who always calls his son dummy the entire time, or like you said, All in the Family.
Yeah, those are more 70s, but
yeah.
I remember there was a time like that's one thought I thought about some of these. I remember the shows like that. Mentioned Green Acres, and Andy Griffith was one. Petticoat Junction, which Green Acres was kind of a spinoff of that, the same little town of Hooterville and all that. So you had a lot of these rural shows, and was kind of a joke, I think, circled around at some point. Some people at CBS decided we need to cancel everything that has a tree, and they got all these country shows and got rid of these little small town America and went to the more, and then that's when you're going into the All in the Families, Good Times, more inner city, more urban, and a whole different, not the wholesome American value like the Andy Griffith Show or something like that was a whole different show where something like All in the Family is so drastic from what you would see in the 60s, those kind of family shows.
Yeah, I never watched Andy Griffith. Did you watch Andy Griffith at all, Brian?
I did, because on my mom's side of the family, a lot of them are really into Andy Griffith, and so I haven't watched the whole series, but I've seen enough to kind of be familiar with that one.
I've just seen clips of Don Knotts. I like Don Knotts a lot. He's such a unique style.
He was like the one that stole the show. It's like there was Andy and Opie and like the family values and stuff, but he was the comedy of that show. I don't think they would have lasted as long without him.
No, definitely not. But
yeah, a lot of them
definitely not
him and being a little kind of over the top, and they only let him carry one bullet, and he had to keep in his pocket.
Yeah. To catch my joke, they're definitely not.
See, now you get two people to agree on you. And when two Rodenburgs agree on one thing, then it will be done as it is in heaven. I think that's in the Bible.
I keep thinking about that Parks and Rec quote from Dennis Feinstein. I am nourished by your hatred.
Yeah, but Andy Griffith.
Okay, go back.
I'm getting anytime you quote Jason Mantzoukas, I try and navigate away from it. Going back to like Andy Griffith, that felt like a very what's the word, sincere type show.
Yeah,
where it's very like little kid, let me tell you about the way life works, and like that sort of put you on my knee type. Am I right?
Yeah, which means it's a kind of a little bit bland, because it's not as interesting to watch. I mean, yeah, you can like the characters and they're enjoyable, and you think, you can learn like parenting lessons from it and stuff, but it's like it doesn't make you laugh out loud except for some Don Knotts stuff.
Sure. So that's why I'll pivot into Green Acres. That's why I liked Green Acres as much. I watched Green Acres a lot, but the thing for Green Acres is that you had the main, I can't remember what his name was, but the main Eddie Albert, that
Oliver
was
Wendell Douglas.
There you go. He was like, even though he had the desire, it was him. Like we hear that in the theme song. It was his idea to move out to this rural area and drag his wife, who loved town square and the shops and everything.
Yeah.
That even though that was his idea, he also kind of had this desire to change this rural town around him too, to modernize it a little bit more to his liking. And so he ends up being the butt of so many jokes because his wife is kind of ditzy and she just goes along with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And her ditziness is usually echoed by the townspeople around her. Like she'll say something to him in the privacy of their own home, and then one of them comes up and they repeat that joke like that they weren't in on the joke at all to begin with.
Yeah.
And it's just like everyone around him is saying the same thing, and he's like, why is no one around me as smart as me? But he's the butt of the joke because he's like, look at this progress I'm bringing. But it's like, no one is asking for that progress. You were the one who came out here. So I liked that conflict.
From the theme songs, that's another show I never actually watched. My guess would be that they're so different that they end up like kind of influencing each other a little bit. Is that right?
Not really.
No,
it's not that deep. It's it's Ava Gabor, Jaja's sister, who is just, she's just there for eye candy, and she's a moral center in a way where it's like, it's this simple life actually works really well for her.
Okay. And
she fits in much better than he does.
Gotcha. Even though it's his town. Okay, I'm starting to get the dynamics there.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. That show, like I was just talking with you. Well, here, Dad, you give me your opinion on Green Acres, and then I'll move in.
I was kind of like,
I took everything.
I don't know. You got to. I never thought of that. But, he's got this. He has this very idealistic. He'd always give these speeches about America and the heartland and all this, and you'd hear the music in the background, and the townspeople were kind of like, okay. But he was grasping for an ideal, I guess.
There was an episode, as you say that I was thinking of, where he was giving that speech, and then you hear like that like the fife playing and like that patriotic, and then his wife's like, honey, everyone's left. And he's like, everyone's gone? Yeah, even the fife player.
But that was kind of a running joke too. Every once in a while, he'd kind of give this little speech to the town people. Why is he here? Why is this important to him? And
yeah, the supporting characters of that were great though. I loved, because they're also very sincere. Yeah. So they're sincerely nice, but because they're a little more simple than his idealistic version of how they should be, yeah, it's hard for him to cope. And so, you know, he gets what's coming to him every single episode, which is fun.
Yeah, that's fun. I just looked up the Wikipedia page for Green Acres, and in the cast list, it lists Arnold the pig.
Yes, the Arnold Zippel, yeah. Because the old couple had a pet pig, and they treated him like he was a kid, yeah, he was like a person, and it was just that was another kind of funny running joke in it. But
there's a legend of the screen that we were talking about him last night. Is Pat Bertram is in that show, and you might not recognize that name, but if you like look up anything from Pat Bertram, like a clip, you'll recognize his voice. You've heard his voice before, like. He's been in a number of modern stuff too. By modern, I think he died like in the 90s, but like modern stuff. He was in Back to the Future 3. He was a voice of like one of the animated Bullets and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He was in 101 Dalmatians, I think. He was a voice in one of those like classic Disney movies too.
Okay.
But you'll recognize his voice and be like, oh, that guy. Yeah, he's in this show.
Yeah, when Marty was going to go get in the gunfight, he was the one that was, if you don't go out and fight him, everyone will call you the biggest yellow belly this side or whatever.
Oh, I can picture that voice.
That was Pat Buttram. He was Mr. Haney. He was kind of the guy Eddie Albert bought the Haney place out there. And he was the guy that sold him. He's always this kind of like con man type of guy.
I give the line to Angie way more. I haven't in a while, but I used to like say that line a lot. It was like, everybody everywhere will say that Clint Eastwood is the biggest yellow belly in the West. That's Pat Buttram.
Yeah. Yeah, no, when he started saying that, I get that. I think it's crazy. Like, is it your whole family can just like drop Back to the Future references at nothing all the time?
Oh, it's easy. Yeah. Very easy to do. Your family can't? That's a problem, Brian. Get on.
I can. Okay, here's the thing. I consider myself a big Back to the Future fan, but I know I'm nowhere near your level.
That's true. No one, not even like Robert Zemeckis is.
What about
like, I didn't even know this stuff. How did you know it?
What about Eric Stoltz? I'm sure he loves that movie.
Did you see? This is a very minor spoiler, but have you seen the new Flash movie?
No, I have not actually seen any of the DC universe.
It's pretty solid, but there's a gag in the middle of it that actually gets a good amount of shelf life. Is he creates this alternate timeline in the movie, and in this alternate timeline, they start talking about how it's like Back to the Future. It's like, oh yeah, I love that movie with Eric Stoltz. And he's like, what? It's like, yeah, Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly. It's like, no, that was Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox, the guy from Top Gun.
I saw an interview with Thomas Wilson.
Oh, that's funny.
Thomas Wilson. He was saying like he got pulled into the director's office, and he thought that him and Crispin Glover did. He thought for sure he was getting fired, and he's like, oh no, Eric's getting fired. You guys are good. We're gonna reshoot a bunch of stuff. He's like, oh, okay. Like
Thomas F. Wilson seems like a really nice guy. He's got this long card.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, you've seen it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I won't tell our audience. They'll just have to be like, "What is he talking about?"
Also, we should jump back 2 decades and get back to the '60s. We're not talking about the '80s yet.
Yeah. Let's get struck by lightning. All right. What's another '60s show?
Well, you're talking about these. We're talking about some of these wholesome family shows that we talked about.
Yep.
In some cases, Beverly Hills, but not Beverly Hills, but Green Acres or Andy Griffith. You also had Addams Family and Munsters. We were talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Before.
Yes.
Which is not exactly your typical family. Neither one's your typical family.
I've seen a couple episodes of the Munsters. I don't know if I've ever seen the '60s Addams Family. I've seen other adaptations of the Addams Family, but not the original.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of the '60s one. I know I've seen more Munsters than I have of the original Addams Family. Mm-hmm. But we talked when we did like our Best Fathers episode, and one of my top picks was Gomez Addams. That he is just a really good father to this family. And what is great about the Addams Family and even the Munsters is that it's a very strong family unit. Yeah. It's just because they're so weird and creepy, like they don't get along with the people around them.
Yeah.
And so there's some commentary on the modern day that I was talking to you about, but you drove us into Addams Family, so give us your thoughts, Dad.
Well, just they're not typical family. There's this odd case, but obviously Gomez was just adored his wife, treated her like she was everything, and
that's French.
And just they're this very cute couple, even though there's this very strange family they were part of.
Yeah,
yep.
Much was a little more unusual because you had the Frankenstein-like guy, the Dracula for the dad, and
but even then they weren't like they had good family values. They just were a Frankenstein and a Dracula and all that.
Yeah, it's just like they're not your typical next door neighbor or typical normal family, quote unquote normal. But
so the couple of
go ahead.
The couple episodes of Monsters that I've seen, it started with the daughter the niece bringing somebody home, and then them ends up being them running away scared once they see the family. Was that like how most episodes started? Was that like the kind of like the running gag, or is that just kind of in the beginning?
That was unique with Munsters because Munsters, one of the characters, the daughter, is a human. She is normal. She's not like the others. Yeah. And so that was a different spin on this idea where Addams Family, they all were weird. And she was just the normal one. So that was a unique idea and a strong perspective.
Yeah, they were more normal looking, but they're just the more this dark macabre side on the Addams Family, as opposed to you have a werewolf for a little boy and you got kind of Frankenstein monster and all those type of You could definitely tell they were different. The others were just, like I said, they were normal, but there was more like a gothic family that was very, very loving and normal in all other ways.
Yeah. So like I could talk about these two a lot, and like I've got trivia ideas about different things with them because like Fred Gwynn, I was again, apparently Dad and I did a lot of prep because this is another thing we talked about last night. How Fred Gwynn, who played Herman Munster, he actually like would wear purple makeup instead of green makeup as Frankenstein. That because the show was in black and white, that purple stood out really well on camera. So can you just imagine? Because Fred Gwynn is pretty tall too. He's like 6'4", 6'5". So can you imagine this big purple giant walking around set with the face structure that Fred Gwynn was fantastic, and he, for me, made the Munsters. Like, all of them were strong, but Fred Gwynn's facial expressions and, like, his calm voice for being a Frankenstein, I just really liked that character a lot.
Yeah, I did like it. I do like his voice. It's very soothing. And it is weird to think, like, with black and white, you would just imagine filling in your head the colors, but you don't know. But yeah, it's just like that. He definitely had a good stage presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's probably the key to both of those. They were so, quote unquote, offbeat, but they didn't know it. They never acted like they were offbeat or different. They were just like, they acted like they were just like everybody else. And it was other people's reaction to them that was kind of, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think going back to the commentary, like this is a great look into the time period at the, right then, because this is during that Red Scare McCarthyism of like, is your neighbor maybe a communist? Are they like, should you be questioning that? Like you see this nosy neighbor idea a lot in the 60s where it's
Bewitched.
Bewitched, like they or Lucy,
the nosy neighbor,
I Love Lucy. Like there's a lot of like the intruding neighbor that they even mocked in WandaVision a couple years ago.
Oh yeah.
And, to have like that idea, like to say maybe the nosy neighbor is on the wrong side of this. Maybe them with their preconceived notions of how this family should be and judging them based on how they look isn't right, because they are just as normal as any other, or maybe they're better than some of these other families. And so I think it was a great idea to say, let's not look at the outside and let's look at how they treat each other and how they act.
You were talking. That's probably, when I'm watching those things, I never thought that deeply about it watching these shows growing up. I've thought more as you've gotten into these things and how movies are structured and stories are put together and character development, all those things. We have talked about those and thinking more about that type of stuff. We didn't think about that, but that was probably the great thing. They weren't sitting there beating you over the head. They weren't preaching at you all something the way stuff seems to get thrown in your face and shoved at you now. Yeah. But they were making the point very subtly.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek had those type of morality plays all the time.
Oh,
and a lot of the shows did. They were telling you things without, or Twilight Zone even, those type of episodes. They made you think about things without,
Yeah.
Without being so blatantly obvious that look how stupid you are. Look at this is how you should be caring for your neighbor or something like that. But there were a lot of people that were different from you, and they're just like you. Yeah. In the case of like the Addams Family or Munsters, they're just like you. They're exactly like you or come from exactly where you did, but the guy loves his wife, he loves his kids, just like you do.
I've seen like a famous clip where it's is Eddie Munster? No, Herman Munster's the dad, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kind of giving the speech about like, it's okay. You can be tall or short or blah, blah, blah. And it just matters who you are and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a good message.
Yeah.
And, all these lines, all these shows have the theme of like, even Green Acres, someone's being taken out of their element or they're not like everyone around them. And their show that fits into that category would be Beverly Hillbillies.
There you go.
Those are both, fish out of water type of stories.
Yeah. I watched some Beverly Hillbillies with my grandparents when I was a kid. I really like that show a lot. And then I remember they had the movie in the 90s of Beverly Hillbillies as well.
Mm-hmm. With Jim Varney.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Buddy Ebsen was the Tin Man originally in The Wizard of Oz.
Yep.
Yeah. That was another show. It's like, the other thing is like everyone just treated them like they were so crazy because they were just like the hillbillies in the nice New York. But again, they had like their own good family values and they had good dynamics with each other. They just weren't used to any modern like conveniences.
Yep.
Yeah, they didn't have money before, but they didn't let it change them.
Yeah,
they got the big house on that, but they still were themselves. They still kind of pretty much sure who they were.
Yeah, this is a show I didn't watch too much of, so I didn't have like some specifics of that. But that definitely is like a great metaphor in this show of like a lot of people have let money change them, and it's just like the exterior that you have shouldn't decide who you are.
Well, and on that episode in that show, they had interesting characters. They had Jethro, the nephew, who was like the dumb character. He's kind of like Joey from Friends, but he's not without the player aspect. He's just kind of a dum-dum. Yeah. And they had Granny, who like was played by a younger woman in old woman makeup because they needed her to be able to jump around. The funny thing was, she's the old grandma, but she can jump around and be crazy and like be more physical than an old lady would be. So it was a younger woman dressed like an older woman playing her.
Yeah. My kids love this show, Big City Green, right now. It's an animated one. It's not that they struck it big, but it is this rural family comes to the city, and it's the exact same sort of premise. So, like, there's still a lot of weight that can happen with this type of story. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another reboot of it, either through a TV or movie, in not too long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So, Dad was scrolling because he's got his list here. So, go ahead and take us to the next one.
Like the ones we were talking about.
Well, while he's deciding, we missed one little thing that I wanted to throw out. Gomez Addams. You know who plays him?
What's the? I can picture him. I just don't remember the name.
John Astin, the adopted father of Sean Astin.
Really?
Yes.
Huh. So
Sean believed that John was his dad for a while, and then like I don't think Sean actually knows who his dad is. There's a lot of history of that, but it's like there was like I heard this story about like he believed John was his dad for a long time, and then he thought this other guy was actually his dad after that, and then come to find out no he wasn't, and it's this other person that he thought was maybe. And so there's like 3 potential dads that he has, but John was like the adopted father and was apparently a really good guy. So he was Gomez Addams in real life to our beloved Samwise Gamgee.
That sounds like Lost level dad issues there.
It is, but I mean he at least had a strong father figure, so
yeah,
even if it wasn't the biological dad, God bless him for that. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like in Full House they had 3 different dad issues or dad figures. For a show about the 60s, we're really jumping all over the timeline here.
We are. We do what we want. It's our podcast, Brian. We can
well, those are all 60s though. But
that's true.
I know. I just don't want to use up all the material so we get to the 70s and 80s. Well, we already talked about this in the 60s episode.
That's fine. All right, Dad. What's the next show? What do you got?
Oh, I don't know. We talked about the Cold War and stuff. We had shows like I Spy, Man from U.N.C.L.E. came up at that time.
Nice.
Kind of more serious. Mission Impossible.
Yep.
Which was spy and espionage stuff, but then you also had Then Get Smart, which was kind of a comedy parody of the spy spy genre all at the same time.
I meant to make a note in our intro to be like, hey, because this is probably coming out the same week as Mission Impossible in theaters. So, hey, Mission Impossible, here you go. That's why we're doing it. That's the whole reason. No, not really. All right. Nope. There. That plug is done. No.
So you're talking about the TV reflecting the culture and all that. In the Cold War, that type of thing was going on.
Mm-hmm. So when you go to the theater, when you go to the theater, mention TV guys at the box office and pay full price for your ticket.
They will give you confused looks. That's what you get. So what would you say was your favorite? If you could pick only one of those like spy shows, and I'll throw in like, because we've talked about this, the comedy side, that Get Smart, I'll throw that in.
Oh, we always watch that.
What would you say is like your favorite of the spy shows?
Well, the ones we didn't watch, well, I feel like I remember Mission Impossible was more lasting than like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was and all that, just because it's the just blowing up the tape recorders at the end of the messages, and the theme, I guess, maybe catches it. Remember that more than some of the other shows, but.
So in the Mission Impossible show, Peter Graves plays Jim Phelps. And in the movie version, the very first one, this was crazy, in my opinion, for them to do with a reboot, is that they had John Voight play Jim Phelps. And you think he dies right away in that opening thing, but I'm sorry, I'm spoiling a 25-year-old movie for you. But he actually ends up being the double agent, the bad guy mole that they're looking for. So to take this beloved lead character of this show that they're rebooting and be like, by the way, he was a bad guy the whole time. Like the stones on those people to say that's the choice we're making.
Yeah, for that first movie, that was a pretty bold. It wasn't about Jim Phelps. It was about
and like those kind of moves, no matter how many people love it, there's always going to be people who hate it.
Yeah,
but that was the initial way to go. It wasn't just a remake of that crew.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if going back, like you know how we loved you. Of course, when they were making the show, they weren't thinking like, oh, Jim Phelps is actually a bad guy. He's a mole. But I wonder if you can go back and be like, in hindsight, was he being mole-ish with his behavior here? Was it like, when did he turn?
That's my thing. Whenever the
movie was, you here you're retired after all that time, and it's like, you give all your time and service for that, and here's your gold watch. Thanks, and they kind of write off and forget about you. And after all the things I've done for it. Where they could get more money for being a double agent and helping to sell these.
That's the
indicator. Gave us the motivation of the main villain from Speed. We were just talking about Speed last night. And he had the gold watch thing.
And
the indication
for under the sun is there. So
if you have like
tend to repeat themselves.
If you have any kind of last minute reveal, like, oh, this is it's been like this all along. I think when you're doing something like that, you have to plan ahead, and you have to be able to go back, looking at it with that knowledge and be able to pick it apart. Otherwise, it's just kind of lazy writing. It's like, oh, well, now he's always been the villain. Like, no, but like, if that actor knew with that and was playing that with that knowledge, then that'd be cool to go back and pick it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, you're not going to be able to see that. Be like, but I mean, we do that as fans anyway. We pick things apart and be like, he's really the bad guy, even if they're not supposed to be the bad guy. Like, oh, this hero is probably actually the bad guy of this movie. Or like Indiana Jones didn't need to do anything in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He just got in the way. They would have had the same result if Indiana Jones wasn't there. You're like, okay, well, I don't care about that. Thanks for ruining the movie for me.
Yeah.
So. There we go. We're back to the 80s about a movie that takes place in the 50s, and now we'll go moving to the 60s. I wanted to bring up Get Smart because we hit on that. It's funny, like all four of these that we talked about, Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, Mission Impossible, Get Smart, all had reboots. They all had movies off of them, and they were actually all like, okay, Man from U.N.C.L.E. was pretty good. Mission Impossible, of course, is untouchable. Get Smart was solid for what it was, and then I never watched I Spy because it just got bad reviews.
I don't know if I ever saw this TV show.
I've never seen any of this.
Yeah,
but it was Robert Culp and Bill Cosby were partners, and other spy show. You had the Avengers from.
Oh yeah, and another movie that got made.
60s. That was a terrible movie. Didn't do that justice with Steed and Peel.
Yeah.
Mrs. Peel, I need you.
But I loved the parody. I love Get Smart, the satire of it. It was such a funny show. I remember as a kid, like the thing that I liked the most about it was the intro and the outro. I loved seeing him walk down that hallway and all the doors closing or opening for him.
I've seen that parodied by other things. Like they did one of those in like a Family Guy where they parodied that, you know, and different stuff. Like, so I kind of get that tangentially.
All right. Okay. Hang on. We'll pause for a second.
We added a 60s telephone sound effect.
So with all those movies and shows turned into movies, like back when there were shows, the one I gravitated to for sure was Get Smart. I just loved the comedy, and I was watching an episode of it recently, and there was like this is like peak comedy of it. Like he is getting shot at. Maxwell Smart is getting shot at from like multiple goons in this building, and he runs across this street, and there's a cop waiting on the other side. He's like, "Officer, they're shooting at me," and he starts writing up. He's like, "Well, I'm giving you a ticket for jaywalking. You crossed where there wasn't an intersection." He's like, "But they're shooting." He's like, "Well, that's homicide. I'm traffic." And so he keeps writing, and then he makes him sign it like, "Now I'm going to have to make you go cross the street again, and then cross it the right way this time." And so he runs across while they're still shooting, and then he crosses again in that crosswalk. Or no, he's not able to do that yet. Because they're still shooting at him, he calls a cab company, gets 3 cabs to park in that crosswalk, and he gets in one cab, gives the guy like $1, gets out, gets in the next cab, gives the guy $1, gets out, gets in the next cab, and this one has an old lady sitting in the back ready, waiting with a gun. She's another spy. And he gets back out of the cab, goes in the cab he just got out of, takes the $1 back from the guy who's sitting there, goes back, gets the next cab, takes $1 back from the guy sitting there. Like, that's the absurdity of Get Smart, and they do it really well, and it's a lot of fun. I love that show.
Yeah.
There, now I'm done.
So, I mean, these are cool. Like, I just don't have a lot to add because I've never seen these shows. When I think of the 1960s, the first show that comes to mind for me is Gilligan's Island, which to me, I think is like one of the most pinnacle 60s shows.
Yeah. Love Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, so preposterous, but
yeah. Well,
no, of course not. You can build a radio out of a coconut, no problem.
Well, the thing is, like, they're stranded on an island, so there shouldn't be any guest stars.
Yeah, that by itself is
I just got stranded here too. I know.
I'm just passing through, and I'll forget to tell people you're here.
Yeah,
it's one of those flavor of the week shows that like nowadays would get stale because it's that every time they have a plan to get off the island, and every time Gilligan does something and messes everything up.
Yeah,
it's the same concept every single episode.
Yeah.
And sure, there's a comfort to it, and especially back then, I think there was a comfort to knowing what you're going to get.
Yeah, well, and
still, just like, come on.
Before people were debating if Leonardo DiCaprio could fit in the door, before people were debating how Monica and Rachel could afford their apartment, people were debating why do they bring so much luggage on a 3-hour tour?
Exactly. And then the more sadistic of them were debating how long before the skipper snaps and just takes Gilligan out. Yeah. Guys, Gilligan had a bad accident. Poor little buddy.
Well, in a lot of these shows, like I just know like the theme songs, and if I'm not mistaken, there was an original version of the theme song which was almost the same, but they're listing everybody out, and they list 5 out of the 7 characters, and then they say and the rest. They don't miss. They didn't do the professor or Marianne.
Professor Marianne, yeah.
Dad knows why.
But, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I know why, but they did do that. They went to the 5 and all the rest. And they had to change it to the second. They did change it to add the other 2 characters. The interesting trivia thing on that is, you've probably heard this before. The beginning scene is in black and white. The boat pulling out of the harbor.
Yep.
As they're starting on their 3-hour tour. Yeah. Someone noticed that if you notice that the flags are half-mast. Because they shot it in late November of '63 after the Kennedy assassination.
Oh,
I never put that together. Still a half mast when that footage was with the ship going out of a harbor somewhere. The flags are half mast because it was filmed within a week of the assassination.
So JFK never got to watch Gilligan's Island.
No, that was after his time, but the flags were at half mast because of that.
That's cool. I never would have known that. That's something that could have made a great trivia.
That's an interesting little. Yeah, strange little odd tidbit for it. That one came out in '64. Gilligan's Island came out in '64, so that was November '63. So probably maybe a summer replacement type of thing. or late spring, and then it ran the 2 or 3 years, whatever it was. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't explain why these specific 5 people, because the Gilligan and the Skipper worked for the boat, the tour company. Like, why were the rest? It seems like a random match of the other 5 passengers. Why were they all there? Like a rich couple who, like, you think if they were that rich, they could have just hired out for themselves though, without anyone else there.
probably would on a private one. That's not with all these other people, but
I mean, of course, you want a wide variety of characters so that you can have more stories to tell.
Yeah.
The different perspectives from the rich people. They brought their luggage all. Like I said, on a 3-hour tour, they have all these changes of clothes and all of this other stuff. And
did they ever get rescued? Did that how the show ended?
I thought that they did, and like returned to the island as a resort, and I think that's why there was like one of these like the Harlem Globetrotter episode or something like that. One of these where they brought in a big celebrity was coming back to the island as a resort.
I feel like they did one of those made-for-TV movie things after when they went back to open a resort there or something.
Yeah, but the thing with the rest was Tina Louise, who played Ginger. Her agent, when she got signed to the show, wanted as high as billing as she could, and they were able to negotiate up to 5th billing. But then she said, "And I don't want anyone's name after mine." So she got the 5th billing, and then would not let any other name be said after her character's name. That's why it was "and the rest." They must have renegotiated it in the seasons after that, because they obviously changed that. But at the time,
that one I didn't know.
They couldn't.
If she wants to be last, just move her name to the end. Like,
well, she still needed to be 5th billing.
It's so weird.
Yeah, I know.
Like, there's an actor on 24 who had a pretty decent sized recurring role, but his name is never in the credits because he was very staunch. Like, I will not have my name be on screen with anybody else's. And they had like all the recurring characters were like they would flash on the screen 2 at a time. And so he opted just to not even be credited at all because he didn't want to share his on-screen credit name with anybody else.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of people hard to work with, I'm sure it was difficult to work with Nazis back in the day, but Hogan's Heroes did that anyway.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a great segue. No, Hogan's Heroes. So I love the story of Hogan's Heroes because it's a show, like we've talked about a lot of shows that nowadays maybe they wouldn't have the same appeal. I can see a show like Hogan's Heroes being made nowadays and them not changing a ton of it. They just maybe updating some of their comedy or some of their jokes, or even some of their serious storylines. But they could keep that tone pretty similar and still have a hit today because the idea of like. And that was the whole pitch behind Hogan's Heroes is that the show writers, they come in with this idea and the executives are like, why do we need another war show? Why do we need another war movie? We've seen plenty of this sort of stuff. And he's like, well, here's the hook is it's these guys in a POW camp in Nazi Germany. And they keep getting the best of these Nazis and they keep outsmarting them and they're able to fight from within. I'm like, that is a very intriguing concept. And it's no wonder it was greenlit and ran for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I love Hogan's Heroes. It's a lot of fun. It's a great show to watch. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, just like how in the as ruthless you painted it, how ruthless the Nazis really were. It's like how could and they kind of you saw with some of the characters like the Gestapo guy.
Yep.
He got so frustrated with Klink and everybody. But how could he get away with him being a commander of this place? It would be so preposterous. How could that level of incompetence not get noticed and all that? So that was the gig. They had the perfect record. No one's ever escaped because once they started having escapes, they realize how bad this guy is and they get rid of him. That blow up the whole operation. So
exactly
that was kind of the trick behind it. But and just to think of that ruthless Nazi regime as being that Keystone Cop-ish, and that incompetent is just kind of an interesting take on it. But apparently a lot of the people in the production and even some of the actors, a lot of them were of Jewish descent. Oh, so people are like, well, wouldn't that be offensive to, like you're talking about making something nowadays? Would that be offensive to because of the Holocaust and all that? But most of them, a lot of the staff and actors were.
Yeah.
The guy that played Klink was definitely Jewish and had would have had family in the camps and those types of things,
And for even like, they don't make him a sympathetic character, but you don't root against one of the Nazis, of Sergeant Schultz. You kind of laugh along with him because he seems like a nice guy. Like, it's weird to say that about a Nazi, but he seems like a nice guy. And it's almost like, if you would have wanted to, if the writers really would have wanted to explore his character in like a more serialized way versus just the episodic how it was, is that you really could have dove into like, this character didn't seem like the type that he wanted to be there. That he was just another victim of like having to follow orders. Victim is probably the wrong word, but he's just another guy who had to follow orders and didn't want to, because that's just not his natural disposition. And I'm like, that's a very interesting character, but it would be hard to tackle that one specifically. But like all of these American guys, and like and then Richard Dawson playing the Englishman as well. So it's like all the allies, I should say. But
you had all of them with the Frenchmen and Germany and so which would have been in all of the European ones. They would have been in the camp with them.
There's a lot of great characters, and it's fun to see them all have their different like abilities, and just like how Hogan is able to reel that in and to be the leader that he was too in that. Creating good scenarios. What do you think, Ben?
No, that's like, this is why we needed a guest on the 60s episode, because like most of these shows I just know the theme song, but it's interesting to see here like the themes and like and what's going on, and like just how far TV's come, and like how we still have a lot of these same principles happening.
Yep. All right. That's Hogan's Heroes. What other? We've talked a good amount about stuff. So like, there's one thing that I wanted to wrap up with, but there you go. Dad just hit on Star Trek, and that is for sure like
that's the original, right?
Yeah, I would call myself a Trekkie, but I don't think I've really ever watched a full. Maybe the Trouble with Tribbles episode I watched of Star Trek, but I haven't seen that much of the original series. I saw the original series movies, and then I saw a lot of Next Generation and everything past that. But I never watched like the original. And so, what was that like? Because I imagine you watched the original back then.
Actually, they did a lot of the morality kind of plays. They it took place in the 60s. So there was one, I remember there was one where there's more of a primitive culture and all that. And the Klingons were the two warring factions of this more primitive culture, and the Klingons were helping the one side. So we had to help the side that we were friendly with. And it's kind of a real metaphor for, North and South Vietnam. You had, we were talking about the one about the Doomsday Machine. That was an episode I just saw the other day. The mutually assured destruction with that nuclear war. There was the one with William Wyndham was the commodore of the ship that got attacked by this Doomsday Machine that was set out to, we like the normal nuclear weapon thing where if you try to destroy us, we'll destroy everything. Kind of go real scorcher thing. They would eat up planets and all of this. And the guy lost his crew because they beat him down to the planet, and this machine ate this planet up and just blew this planet up. And so there was a metaphor for that. There was the city on the most popular one was the city on the edge of forever or something like that, where Kirk went back. We were talking about Nazi Germany a little bit there. He went back. They were on the planet's surface, just 3 or 4 of them, and McCoy went through this time portal type of thing, and then they're recording. They can see Earth's history going through there. So Spock's recording this thing as it's going on, and then all of a sudden this Enterprise is gone because something happened. So they go back in this time portal to find out what McCoy did, and somehow he had something to do back in the 20s that affected World War II in Germany, and whatever he did kept the U.S. out of the war. So Germany won the war. So the United States would have ceased to exist, and the Federation didn't exist. That's why the ship disappeared. Sure. So then he has to figure out what happened, and then there's 2 possibilities because he was filming all this, and there's 2 possibilities. It's almost like Back to the Future. Do you erase yourself out of existence if you don't do the right things?
Yeah.
More Back to the Future.
But you know, we got about how these themes keep repeating each other, and there's that one. How often are those fish out of water stories you talked about with like Green Acres, or that's a fish out of water story and Perfect Strangers. Every different country comes here or lives here,
and science fiction was always like a really good vehicle for telling these metaphorical ideas, and so that's why Star Trek was able to be
black and white one with the two guys warring with each other. One, what's it? You're the same. No, he's black on this side. I'm black on this half of the face, and the other guy was the opposite.
Yeah, it's like how stupid that looks.
Exactly. Stupid that looks. You're exactly the same. No, we're not.
And so, like, Star Trek was
it's a great vehicle to tell stories without letting you know that you're really telling you that particular story.
Exactly. And for it to be in the middle of the space race, too, like Yuri whatever his name was, the Russian guy who went to space in this 1961, like kicks off the 60s by they make it to space and capstone the end of the 60s with 1969 Neil Armstrong on the moon. So in the middle of the 60s, we have all this intrigue about space and beating Russia to space and all that sort of stuff. So along comes this show about this utopian society, and
we made it and found all these other planets out there.
Yeah, exactly.
We did. Was Star Trek the first of that kind of show?
I don't know if it was because it was Lost in Space earlier than that, or was that
Lost in Space? I think was a little earlier than that.
Yeah. So there was like Flash Gordon is another great example. That's before this, and so there was more like sci-fi stuff, but this really. So Star Trek, the TV show, did so much for sci-fi and just even for television. Like it was the first interracial kiss on TV was from Star Trek between Kirk and Uhura. And they did the kiss between them, and then the producers wanted to get like an alternate just in case they wanted to use that alternate. And because William Shatner and Nicole, however you pronounce her last name,
it sounds like Nicole.
Yeah, it's exactly
Nichols or something like that.
That's it, Nicole Nichols. Yeah,
it's so similar.
And so between the two of them, they understood the importance of that moment. And so when they were asked to Nichelle Nichols, thank you, when they were asked to reshoot that and to do an alternate take, they kept messing up the alternate take, so they would have to use the take where they did the kiss.
They probably knew that they were gonna back out of it if they could.
Absolutely, yeah.
Left with no choice to
exactly. And then Star Trek also, in terms of like what it does for sci-fi, that George Lucas was able to go to producers and say, look at what Star Trek did, look at its popularity, I want to make a movie about the space stuff. And so he does Star Wars because of the popularity of Star Trek. And then the Star Wars movie gets really popular, and then when they want to make the Star Trek movies, they point to Star Wars as saying, like, look at how popular this was, people want to see these movies. And so helped each other.
I mean, this is again jumping to like the 90s, and I wish I knew the details. But I saw this video. It was like there was some TV promotional event in the 90s. They had a bunch of different characters from different shows, actors from different shows on, and the one actress in like rehearsals was told, because of like race stuff, even in the 90s, she was told, don't hug Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And then to spite that, and she planned it with him ahead of time, just despite all the racist people, she went up and kissed him instead.
Take that. Well, I didn't hug him.
Yeah. It's crazy how like that stuff just like, permeates culture, and how like those actors were responsible for putting that kiss in the air because they made it so that they couldn't edit around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to watch how things change in TV culture and seeing how to like another group of shows is very similar to me in the appearance and like this concept is Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie.
Oh yeah, totally would forgot about those. Yeah,
very similar type shows. Mm-hmm. But I like, especially I Dream of Jeannie. I feel like I Dream of Jeannie would be hard for people to accept as a show today because I'm sorry, you've got this male character who the woman that he loves can make anything happen, can do whatever he wants her to do, and she doesn't have a say in it, even though she kind of has a say. But like, she has to listen to her master and serve him and appeal to his every whim. And then he even gets mad at her for when things don't go exactly the way that he wants them to go. I'm like, that.
Wait, where's the controversy?
Believe it or not, some people would not view this as female empowerment. I don't know why.
I don't get it, but I mean, if you say so, I get what you're saying.
Very similar, but Bewitched is a completely different vibe with it.
Yes,
she wanted to live
absolutely
in that world, and she was making a choice to live in that world, and if she was very still independent. Where a genie has to, whoever opened the bottle.
Yeah,
you have to do what they say.
Now I like
she did not have the choice, but
yes,
the same type of thing. The magical spells and causes confusion, and and people trying to figure out what's making these weird things go on, and so there's very similar in that way. But the two Elizabeth Montgomery or Barbie Eden characters are just so different.
Kind of set the stage for Sabrina the Teenage Witch later.
Yeah, I feel like there's more that established kind of a trope that. It's hard for me to pick at and like think of other shows that are like this, but I mean, it's definitely been that like something mysterious is going on and I'm going to get to the bottom, especially like the nosy neighbor we talked about. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'm going to figure this out. And then they never do. They're always the curious individual's always a step ahead.
Yeah. Kravitz was always the nosy neighbor. And then the general that, the guy he worked for on the base. He was kind of the nosy neighbor, quote unquote. He's trying to figure out there's something going on with the Nelsons. What's going on here?
Heck, even Phineas and Ferb is a version of that idea, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to conclude with, unless we've got some other ones.
I'm sure there's a bunch of
missing ones. The only one I almost forgot about that I was looking through this list was only on about a year or two. It was a show called Time Tunnel.
Okay,
that was in the '60s. But it was the guys go back in time trying. It reminds me, how about we repeat these stories or these ideas and they come up later. It's kind of like a quantum leap type of thing. These guys, they were trying to invent time travel of some sort. And the guy went back on his own. He had newspapers and stuff that he took back that were from he was trying to save the Titanic from going down. In the first episode.
Yeah.
So one guy goes in there and the people that work in the place, quantum leap, he jumps in there on his own. So they send someone else in there to help him out or try to bring him back home. And he goes back there. They're trying to show the captain, see, I've got these things. It's dated 2 days now. You're going to hit this bike, trying to warn them and all that. They couldn't do it. So they end up they're trying to get them back, but they end up leaping through time, different places in time, trying to, like the quantum leap, fix things that have gone wrong.
Yeah. I like that idea.
And that's an old show back in the '60s. It was only on about 1 or 2 years, but
yeah.
We never mentioned
that type of show.
I know we've talked about the show when we talked about cartoons written recently, but there's also the Flintstones, which was in the '60s, which was a big
Flintstones and Jetsons animated series.
And you know that Fred and Wilma Flintstone were the first couple to ever be seen sleeping in the same bed together on primetime television.
Well, it's okay because it's animated. No one was worried about that.
That's when they were easing into it,
Yeah,
it's crazy. Those shows, like you couldn't even have them laying in the bed, not even like engaging in anything, just like laying in the same bed together, married with a couple. They couldn't do that.
So you do it with a cartoon instead, like you can put these situations on another planet with two different alien races, and make a commentary about what's going on here.
Yeah,
it's just crazy to think they're making a commentary about it. Here it's just a cartoon, and it's okay.
Like you hear about how the hippie, crazy, wild '60s, how some of the '60s was like that, but on TV it had to be so clean cut.
Yeah. There's actually a good amount of mainstays of cartoons or kids programming for us. Like there's some that happened at the very end of the '60s, and so they're technically more '70s shows, but Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was in 1968. And also on public access, we had Sesame Street, very tail end of 1969 in November. So, I mean, that's barely makes it into the 60s. But also Scooby-Doo. That was in 1960 as well. And some of those, like Sesame Street and Scooby-Doo, we still have new programming from that material.
Yeah.
They got started back then. Flintstones has been a little bit since we've had Flintstones endured for a while. Sure, we had the live action movies, but they had some made for TV cartoon movies too.
It's barely the '60s, but Sesame Street started in November of '69. So, like I said, just a month and a half of the '60s.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of really good family programming then, but I don't know about you. Like for me, I feel like it's probably like Blue's Clues, where it's like it came out when I was technically a kid, but I was old enough that I was like, and this isn't. So like you probably don't have too much of like Sesame Street from when you were watching it when you were then, because you were what, like 11, 12.
Yeah, by then that was
type of thing.
That was a little past.
But I grew up, as Robert California would say, I grew up on the street, or on the streets. Ours is a metaphorical ghetto, wouldn't you say, Brian?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to hit on, but very briefly, because we talked a lot more about this just a few weeks ago in our sketch comedies. 1960s also had, in 67, Carol Burnett, and 1969, Monty Python's Flying Circus. So we hit on both of those shows in our recent episode. Go check that out. And
also, just jumping back real quick, if you have HBO Max, I recommend checking out the documentary about Sesame Street called Street Gang, and it's about like how the show got started. I know it's a crazy title, but it's talking about how the show got started and like the educational side of it, and how like the racism part of it. Like some people didn't like that there were so many black actors on the show, and it's just crazy to think a lot more went on behind the scenes to making that show than you think. It's not just, hey, it's Ernie and Bert. It's way more to it than that, which was interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's crazy how it was bold just to cast certain characters.
Oh yeah,
like just to say, yeah, they're going to be on here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different time, but glad
in some ways it's not, which is sad.
Sometimes. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is it. Anything else, Dad, before we close out?
No, no. There's a lot of things we didn't talk about, but
we're talking about a whole decade of TV.
Whole decade of TV.
We're not gonna hit every
barely talked about some of the some shows like Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock and some mysteries. You didn't even get like the cop genre shows or Dragnets and
there's a good amount of those procedurals back then.
Yeah, some of those started there. And
last week we talked about Ted Lasso, and we had two different trivia questions. First, mine that I posited was, what TV show did they subtly reference in the finale? And that is Cheers. They had May, the bartender, adjust a photo. That photo was of Geronimo Jackson, which it was in the dressing room of Nicholas Colasanto, who played the character of Coach on Cheers. After he died, they moved that photo out into the set dressing of the bar. And in the finale, Sam, as he walks to the back of the bar, adjusts that photo just to like have a nod to Coach. I don't know why they referenced that in Ted Lasso, but they had the bartender adjust that same exact photo. So they referenced Cheers in the finale. And the other trivia question we have came from Andrew, and he said, who was the last team to win the Premier League other than Manchester City? The answer was Liverpool.
All right, this week's trivia, we talked a lot of different things, but we talked about Hogan's Heroes. And Hogan's Heroes, one of the show writers, before he pitched the show, he actually was working at a software company. He pitched the show, got into that, and then decided he wanted to be a producer in Hollywood after the success of Hogan's Heroes. And the first movie he worked on, he won an Oscar for Best Picture. So what was that movie from the showrunner of Hogan's Heroes?
Couldn't tell you.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. Want to give a special thanks to my dad for popping in here and giving us his
anytime, Wilbur.
There it is. Callback. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm Ed.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.